solve a difficulty that's between other people, or that's between the person who's posting and somebody else who's not part of the conversation. Sometimes I talk about electronic media as discarnate communication, because it's not face-to-face. We don't have to sit down and say, beloved, I'm challenged by what you've done, rather than, lighting the fire on the internet. That's the tension that I find. The challenges between the United Thank Offering and the DFMS leadership, both Executive Council and the people at 815, has to be worked out between them, face to face. And we're doing it. We're working at it. And some very hopeful things happened this last week. You're welcome. You're welcome. But no, I think social media is great for quick conversations. Twitter is short pulses of info, but it's not dialogue. It's not the kind of deeper, incarnate reading the presence of God. It could be if we had better discipline in how we used it. It could be move in that direction. But it's sometimes a quick, it's a way of scoring points sometimes. I said we go back to the woman in red. In the brown. Yeah. Not everybody has pupil ears.
Solitary confined prisoners, 23 hours a day, sometimes 47 hours every 2 days. And I was just hoping to get an update. I visit ACUS's website often, trying to make connections. But on this particular issue, I find it that either I'm missing or not getting the path or not making the right connections. Missing ACUS, the main principal. Our pastor is very supportive. I have 7 writers now, witnesses. But I'd like, if I could get an update on our position on this new profiteering of destroying the souls of human beings in these new fortifications. If we have, if we're looking into this, if we have a position nationally on this or
church-wide, I am not certain that we have, as a church, made any formal policy about for-profit prisons. But I would go back and find out. Give me a card and I will communicate with you about that. I do know, I can say several things about our prison ministry. Federal chaplaincy, we support chaplains who work in federal prisons. The bishop who is probably more familiarly known as the bishop for the armed forces, oversees chaplains in the armed forces, federal prisons, and federal hospitals. There are a few chaplains, Episcopal chaplains in federal prisons, but only a handful. That's something that you can help with as you look around at younger people who are thinking about ordination. You have to be under 36 to be admitted to that career in federal, as a federal prison chaplain. So it's a challenge to find people. There are networks related to prison ministry, and I'm not intimately familiar with them, but I can help connect you if that is something you're looking for. I want to say that the National Council of Churches is also in a restructuring mode, and one of the things it's going to work on very intentionally is mass incarceration. The kind of racial profiling or drug law consequences that possession of one kind of cocaine gets you thrown in jail forever, and the other kind of cocaine you get out in a year. and it tends to be related to race because of usage patterns. Our drug laws are profoundly unjust in many cases, which is a piece of what you're talking about. Please.
I have a question for you. Since I'm one of the older deacons in this diocese, I have a question for you. I like working with the youth, and I enjoy it immensely. But now we're talking about cyber communication, cyber stuff, and in this area, we just have suicide, cyberbullying. How do we reach these young people? And how do we get them interested in a ministry in the churches? Because a lot of people in this diocese are retiring, and we want young people to come along. How can we recognize them as very good people to help our diocese out? And what can we do?
I think the last part is the center of the question. It has a great deal to do with how can we be present in the community. How are people in this diocese leaving their churches, going outside the doors to be in conversation with those teenagers who feel so lost? Oftentimes I think we find it easier to look after school children after school who need supervision, we think, or tutoring. Teenagers need the kind of adult friendship and mentoring desperately. One of the predictors of a child's success eventually is whether or not there are unrelated adults importantly present in that person's life. How might that happen? How might you develop, some version of a big sister or, a foster grandparent program or, well, yes, somebody closer to that age might. What works in his life?
What you said about having people surrounding him. What you said about having people surrounding him that are not related. I mean, it's important to have people that are related, but in my son's life, I can speak very clearly to people, members of the church, of our local church and the greater church that speak into him and speak into me and have walked along with us through his life.
Exactly. You have to get involved with the family. You can't just say it's this one piece. It's all connected.
It's all connected. You've got to work with them on their level.
Right.
And you've got to do cyber, but you've got to go face to face.
Right.
I'm living with an 18-year-old.
God bless you.
Thank you.
God bless the 18-year-old.
Amen.
I remember reading a story about 10 years ago about a town where skateboarding was illegal. And so the new pastor in town looked around at the church and said, there's a big backyard here. I'm going to build a skate park in the backyard for the teenagers who can't skateboard on the street. And she did. And funny thing, some of them actually became members of the congregation. But they had interested adults. They had connection with a community that cared about them. What's that? Well, back here. We'll come over there. You see the hand over here?
Thank you so much on the Southwest. This is my question for the Latin. What are the opinion for the Latin administration for Southwest Episcopal Church?
What's my ideas for?
Episcopal Church and the Latin administration.
For Latino ministry?
Yeah.
Yes, es muy esencial, es muy necesario. Debemos hacerlo más ampliamente y pronto.
Okay, thank you so much.
the Diocese of Los Angeles, every week, they worship in 19 different languages.
Bishop, you talked about the unfair drug laws. How about speaking as a church to those who make those laws, who believe that they have both their feet firmly implanted in Christianity, and who are making other laws that are antithesis of Christianity, and yet hold that they are upholding values of so-called Judeo-Christian America? Where is the voice of the church in that? What is our role as a church?
Thank you for a wonderful question. Part of the 5 marks of mission, does that ring bells? Okay. 4th mark of mission is about transforming unjust structures of society, which is what you're talking about. This church, through its church-wide budget, supports our Office of Government Relations, which is in Washington, D.C. We do a little bit of advocacy work in other nations that are part of the Episcopal Church. But the Office of Government Relations looks at domestic policy, foreign policy, and environmental issues, immigration issues. Those are the primary foci of our work. We collaborate with the Lutherans very directly. We had a shared staff member until a couple of months ago when she decided to go back to graduate school to get a PhD. We will get another shared person, I hope soon. We collaborate with other Christian denominations and other faith communities, with the Jews, the Sikhs, with Muslims at times, to address issues that we see as being unjust in Congress. I was in Washington, D.C. the beginning of last week for an immigration summit sponsored by Church World Service that brought religious leaders from across the United States and from a number of foreign countries, including 22 Episcopalians, to learn about immigration issues, and then to go to the Hill and lobby mostly their representatives. The Senate has already passed a pretty workable bill, to lobby their representatives about getting busy and doing something. The sense is that unless we do something about immigration reform now, it's unlikely to happen later in the electoral calendar. There's been a lot of blowback after the recent resolution.
I'm thinking more of those people who broke out into the song Amazing Grace while flooding the country.
Well, how do people get to Congress? I think a central part of the church's role is to educate people about being effective, faithful citizens of their nation. Not telling people how to vote, but encouraging people to let their faithful understanding inform their vote, and to collaborate with their neighbors.
Bishop Robert Carey touched on UTO.
Yes.
Could you give us a little more what's going on?
Their UTO was started almost 124 years ago, the United Thank Offering, to support women missionaries who couldn't be formally appointed through church-wide structures because they weren't men. The United Thank Offering's been enormously effective, both in encouraging people to focus on being grateful. We are a Eucharistic people. We are a Thanksgiving people, and to remind people of that through their daily prayer and offering. Over the years, the offering has usually been a couple of $1 million each year that's gathered in from those little blue boxes across the whole of the church, and not just the United States. One of the most moving experiences I've had is to have the Church of the Philippines bring its UTO offering long after they became an autonomous province of the Anglican Communion, because they were once part of us. What's going on now is aligning the loose structure of the UTO work with the legal requirements of the IRS in terms of nonprofit tax status, in terms of and with our own practices, church policies about oversight, fiduciary oversight of funds. There is no intent to take away from the UTO committee its role in deciding where to grant the money. What the Executive Council did yesterday was simply to take the proposed criteria for grants that will be made in 2014. The World Mission Committee at Executive Council said, yes, this looks wonderful, and they affirmed it. That's enough for what we need. What we're going to work on in the coming months are a memorandum of understanding simply about how we do business together. It appears that the United Thank Offering Board is grateful, deeply grateful for the possibility of getting support for meeting planning and travel arrangements and bookkeeping and stuff like that. That's what the church center structure is there to provide. Well, it's very dear to many people, many people. The new president of the UTO board, Barbara Schaefer, and I put out a statement today, and you can probably find it on the